Greetings and salutations, students of Greek. We continue our study using N. Clayton Croy's Primer of Biblical Greek with Lesson 3, talking about first declension nouns. So, let's get into it. The function of Greek words are determined by their morphology, not word order. This is absolutely crucial because in English we know it's a subject-verb-object language. So the way we communicate meaning in English is the order of words. We're going to have our subject in the first position, then we're going to have our verb in the second position, the object in the third position, followed by the indirect object, and then the object of the preposition. So the way you communicate the meaning of these nouns in the sentence, so that our subject, God, is our subject. The verb is writes. So God writes. What does God write? God writes the direct object, that is, he writes words. Who are these words to? The indirect object. The words are written to the servants. Which servants are they? They're object of the preposition. They're servants of the gospel. Now, you don't need to memorize all of these different functions, object, indirect object, object of the preposition. What I want you to simply observe is that the way that we communicate meaning in English is by word order. And we can do the same word order in Greek. Hatheos, graphe, logos, tois, diakonos, tu euangelou. So this is God writes words to the servants of the gospel. All fine and good. But you can have this exact same sentence and rearrange the word order to hatheos, tois, diakonos, tu euangeliou, logos, graphe. And in that instance, you have the same exact meaning. God, in English, the word order would be God to the servants of the gospel, words writes, but you would rearrange it for the translation, the meaning of the sentence, God writes words to the servants of the gospel. Similarly, you could rearrange it and put your direct object in the very first position, subject in the second position. Your verb can be the very last word of the sentence. And so you would read this, logos hatheos tois diakonos tu euangeliou graphe. And in each instance, you would translate this the same way. God writes words to servants, to the servants of the gospel. So how does this work? How do you know what function a word serves in a sentence? The key is to pay attention to the morphology. So here we have a bit of a grammar review. What is a noun? A noun is a person, place, concrete object, or an abstract idea. So a person could be Jesus. It could be a place, Galilee. It could be a concrete object like a boat. It could be an abstract idea like love. Right? These are all nouns. God is a person, so God is our subject, writes words to the servants of the gospel. When the noun is the subject of the verb, it will appear in the nominative case. Nominative equals subject, okay? Or the object of the preposition, as we'll see shortly. When a noun is the direct object of the verb, it will occur in the accusative case. So accusative equals direct object. When a noun is the indirect object, it will occur in the dative case. So the dative is the indirect object. When a noun is possessive, it occurs in the genitive. Now, it gets a little more complicated than this when we talk about the genitive and the dative case and how they function. Lastly, the definite article marks the noun as specific or unique. We'll talk about definite articles in lesson 5, so just hold on to that until later. A verb, what is a verb? A verb is a word that expresses the acting, being, doing, or the like, connecting the subject to the predicate in a clause or sentence. Okay, Tyler, what does that mean? A verb is where the action is. Now, it can be an action verb, right? So a verb can be hear, right? So you hear something, or see, that's a verb. But you can also have a stative verb that describes what something is. So, for example, the sentence, God is love. In this case, you have God as your subject, love as your predicate, nominative, and the verb here is not describing an action. It's describing a predication. It's a being. God is being love. So we'll talk more about the details of different kinds of verbs as we get into them. But for now, simply focus on what function does a word serve in a sentence based on its case: the nominative, the genitive, the dative, and the accusative. Let's look at some more detail on this. There are 5 cases in Greek. For the purposes of this class, we're only going to focus on the 4 most basic cases: nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. You also have the 5th case that we don't talk much about, the vocative, which is the direct address. The reason we don't talk about it is it's often the same as the nominative form anyway, and you can recognize it mostly based on context. So for now, we're just going to sort of recognize the vocative. We'll talk about it briefly, but I'm not going to have you focus on it. I really want you to pay attention to these more important cases to start. The nominative. This is the subject or the predicate of finite verbs. So in the sentence, men see apostles, in Greek, hoi anthropoi blepusin apostolus. Here you have your subject, men, and so it appears in the nominative plural case, hoi anthropoi. That is, the subject of the sentence is not defined by where the noun occurs. Hoi anthropoi could be at the very end of the sentence, and it would mean the same thing. What defines the meaning, the function of this noun in the context of the sentence is its morphology, that it appears in the nominative case. In our next sentence, the woman is an apostle. Hegune estin apostolos. So now in this case, this is the predicate nominative. Why is it the predicate? Because we're saying is. Basically, in the predicate nominative, what you're saying is you have your subject, woman, and you're drawing an equal sign between your subject and what you would typically think of as the direct object, is apostle. Okay, so because this is a equal sign, this is a predicate nominative. And when you see the nominative, it's either going to be the subject of the sentence or it's going to be the predication. It's going to be the thing that's claimed about the subject of the sentence. In this case, that the woman is an apostle. Genitive case. The genitive describes, defines, or talks about possession. For our purposes, the best way to translate in English is with the preposition of. So the sentence, men see the apostles of Jesus, in Greek, hoi anthropoi blepusin tous apostolus tu Jesu. So here, tu Jesu is in the genitive, and it's describing the relationship. Which apostles are we talking about? They're apostles of Jesus. They belong to Jesus. So this is the possessive. But again, don't worry too much about the grammatical categories, because what we'll learn later on is that they're a little more complicated than we initially learn, but that's okay. For our purposes, what we want to know is that when we come across the genitive, we just want to know, we translate of and then whatever the genitive noun is, okay? Dative, usually the indirect object. Translate this with to, with, by, or in. So in the sentence, God writes his words to men, the sentence that we've already seen, hatheas graphe tous lagus autou tois anthropos. Tois anthropos is in the dative case, and it's describing who is receiving the words that God has written. God writes words. Who gets them? Who are they for? Who are they directed to? They're directed to men or humans, tois anthropos. That's the dative case. The accusative case is going to be the direct object of the verb. So, men see the apostles of Jesus, hoi anthropoi blepusin tous apostolus tu Jesu. The tous apostolus is in the accusative case, and the accusative is going to be the direct object. So just as a bit of review here, we have the nominative, which is going to be our subject or predicate, our genitive, which you're going to translate of and the noun, our dative, which you're going to translate in with, by, or to, and then the noun, and the accusative, which is going to equal the direct object. That's what is receiving the action of the verb. Lastly, we have the vocative. This is only in cases of direct address. So in Matthew 9:22, when Jesus encounters the woman who's been bleeding for 12 years and she touches the hem of his garment and she's healed, and he says, "Daughter, your faith has saved you." When he addresses the woman, daughter, he uses this case, the vocative, which is the direct address. Thugeter hepistes su sesukense. So in this case, what you have is a direct address. It's slightly different than nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. For now, don't worry about the vocative. When we see it, it's rare enough in the New Testament that we don't have to spend a lot of time right now. Focus on the nominative, subject or predicate, the genitive, of, the dative, in, with, by, or to, and the accusative, which is the direct object. Those are the noun cases that you really need to focus on.